I'm Josh Wicks of Wicks Files and Customs, and I proudly sponsor this video.
My name is James Cameron, and I love Rolls-Royces. And I want to welcome you to the Rolls-Royce and Bentley University Buyer's Guide. Let's start class. Hello, class. We're here at my favorite place. It's so much I'm here that maybe I should just be paying rent. But we're here with Josh, my mechanic, my mechanical Yoda, and he has literally put my 85 Silver Spur back on the road. It took me 3 years to find him, but that's why I keep saying it's important to have a mechanic before you even think about getting into these cars. I will not even begin to tell you how much money, as far as I'm concerned, has been wasted on mechanics who said, oh yeah, I could do this, I could do that, and they ended up not being able to do it, and guess what? Still taking my money. So don't fall in that rabbit hole. Make sure you have your mechanic before you even get one of these cars. Now, thinking and saying that, I got two, because I just purchased a 1985 Bentley. It's a Mulsanne S after turbo, because the Mulsanne S's actually did start out with a turbo engine. Of course, that ended up with the Turbo R, and they are more known now as the turbo for the Bentley that started it all. But it actually started with the Mulsanne S. But I'm here again with Josh. Hi, Josh. Howdy. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And I want to talk a little bit about what we're getting ready to do with my Mulsanne mechanically. I know we're doing some cosmetics. But before we get into that, I want to talk about, because I think I told you that as far as the two cars are concerned, because now I've had experience with both of them, the Mulsanne is quieter, it's better handling, and the engine also seems quieter, even though it's a 6 and 0.75, or also called 6 3/4 engine. And you're the mechanic, and I trust you very much. What do you think is the reason for that?
So on the car, with the handling wise, the Bentleys were tuned more for a sportier feel, so the suspension is a little tighter on them. Essentially, the Bentleys were designed as a driver car, so the person owning it is going to drive it a lot more and everything like that, so they want a sportier feel. The Rolls-Royces were designed as basically a rider's car. Like, you're supposed to ride in the back, you have a driver, they drive you around, so they're more tuned for comfortability and everything like that. The Bentley, as far as the engine quietness and stuff like that, I think the biggest difference are just the way the cars were maintained over their lifetimes. More than likely the rolls, the mufflers are a little worn out, the packing in them's a little bit less, so you're going to hear a little bit more of the engine sound. We had some issues with the insulation on the hood of on the Rolls-Royces,
Right.
kind of torn up in a couple of spots, whereas the Bentley, everything's actually in a lot better shape and condition that you're starting with there. So I think that's a lot of contributing to most of the engine noise inside the cab of the car and everything like that.
Okay. Now, we're going to do what I call upgrades. Purists are going to say, what are you doing? But since I do drive the car somewhat at night, I want an upgrade. So the first thing that we did was we get the LED headlights like we did for the Rolls, but they were much more looking like the original Bentley. So
Yes. So what we did is we ordered up 7-inch glass housing that take an H4 bulb.
So what we did was some upgrades as far as I'm concerned to the car, because I do drive both cars occasionally at night. I do performances, and a lot of times those performances will end when it gets dark. So I did want the LED lights because they're brighter, they go out further. But the type of LEDs that you have for my Rolls and the type of LEDs and the housing for the Bentley are two different entities. So explain that.
Yes. So on the Bentley, it uses a standard 7-inch glass housing. They were sealed beam bulbs factory. What we're replacing them with is a glass housing that accepts an H4 bulb, so it has a replacement bulb inside of it instead of being a sealed beam.
Gotcha.
So we're going to use LED bulbs in those housings to give you the LED lights. As on the Rolls-Royce, we bought 7-inch square lighting, we bought a sealed unit that comes with an LED top panel inside of it, so that's why they have a different look than factory.
Right.
They do also make glass housings now for the square headlights.
Which they didn't before at the time in which we did it.
Yeah, when we did it, there was a hard time getting a hold of them. We can now get a hold of them because I've used those in several other cars now. Because it's actually both of them are interchangeable with American cars that have 7-inch round headlights or the square ones.
Well, if I wanted, just for my class, if I did want it to look a little bit more original with more of the square beams, which I doubt if I'm going to change it, but again, just the knowledge. So what was the difference, or what would be the difference now in pricing?
It's roughly around the same pricing, just depending on where you find them. The 7-inch round ones are roughly around $40 for the housing, and then the cost of the bulbs. And LED bulbs range in pricing all over.
That's not an issue. Okay. What about the square ones?
The square ones are roughly around the same price too. I get them through Amazon because it seems to be the best place.
Yeah.
I know, like for American cars, Holly sells their whole kit for the square headlight setup. Those run around $250, and that includes the bulbs and everything like that.
Now that's $250 a side or $250 for the whole floor?
A set, so that's two.
Okay.
I believe you need two sets.
Right, because you have to have high and low.
Yes. And there's options that you can look for online. You can find them from different vendors and stuff like that. And the pricing on that varies widely.
Okay, all right. And what we're also going to do with the Bentley is that we're going to look at the gas gauge, because for some reason the gas gauge is not registering correctly. Now, when I first got the car, obviously just like now because you haven't worked on it yet, the gas gauge wasn't functioning, okay? It wasn't showing true amount.
Right.
But what saved me was that, well, if it got low, the light would come on. And that automatically told me, well, guess what? You better put more gas in.
Right.
So I didn't really have to worry too much about the gauge. I just put gas in it, and when the gas light came up, I knew it was time to put more gas in it. But what corrects that?
So what we're going to check first is the resistance coming from the fuel sending unit. So the readings are based off of resistance, which essentially inside of there is an arm with a float and then a resistance wiper. So as the arm moves up and down in the tank, it moves across the resistor, changing the resistance rating. That returns the signal back to the gauge, and that sweeps the gauge from high to low.
Okay.
Over time, corrosion in the tank increases resistance on that sweep. That changes how it affects the reading. Or older cars and stuff like that use the float that they used was either sometimes they were plastic, they were brass, there were different materials, and sometimes they can cause leakage. Or some of the really older cars use like essentially a foam sort of product that soaks up water. It starts sinking, and then now it no longer reads on top of the fuel. It's actually in the fuel. So there's a couple of things we got to check there. We're going to start by checking the resistance, see if it's within range for what it's supposed to be, and then check the actual physical fuel level in the vehicle and make sure they're reading in accordance.
Yeah.
If everything at the tank side's correct, then we're going to look at the gauge and see if maybe something's with the gauge. Typically, the gauges don't go bad it's usually at the sending unit in the tank where your issues lie. Some other things is sometimes in the wiring or the ground for the vehicle that could cause issues with the resistance treatment as well.
All right. And the last thing I want to kind of go over is the seats. Now, when I got them, the seats, they didn't work. They still don't work because, like I said, you haven't gotten to it yet. And when you are starting to get to that, I do want to come back and show you kind of doing some things with it.
Okay.
But how is that going to be remedied?
So the seats come with a memory function, which saves where you position the seat.
Right.
So you can have two user setup, kind of like newer modern cars, where user 1 and user 2, and the seat automatically adjusts to those positions. The way the circuitry is, it's a in-loop circuit. Basically, is that memory jumps the actual control signals from the switches to the actual motors and everything. In there, there's a circuit board underneath the seats and everything. Those have some issues in the circuit boards being under the seat. Either moisture gets to them, resistance increases, or just from the movement of the sheets and stuff like that. It wears things out. You can actually bypass the memory circuit in there and wire it so just the controls are
the controls front, back, up and down, and
are just going straight to the motor controls for it. So we're gonna bypass the memory circuit so you have control of the seat again.
Okay, all right. Well, considering that I remember cars that didn't even have this kind of stuff, it was like a switch, and you pushed yourself up and you pushed yourself back.
Yeah.
That is not going to be a big deal for me.
Yeah.
And I know that there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are going to write in and say, well, it doesn't have memory. That means it's no longer a Rolls-Royce. Well, I'll suffer.
Yeah.
Okay. But in any event, I want to thank you for taking the time for my class and to let them know what you're going to be doing with the Bentley. And in between, what I'm going to be doing is showing some of the things that you're doing with it physically so that they can see it. So thanks a lot, my friend. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Class, see you next time. Drive safe.